And for added context, last month the U.S. Embassy in Bamako announced that non-essential diplomatic staff and their families would leave Mali. Amid the crisis, it said the fuel disruptions had the potential to disrupt the overall security situation in unpredictable ways. Also, reports saying that gunmen have kidnapped 5 Indian nationals in Mali. No group has claimed responsibility. For more, let's cross to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and speak to Bruce Whitehouse, an assistant professor of anthropology at Lehigh University. Hello to you, Bruce. Real quickly, just when we look at sort of the international reactions here, help us understand what's happening on the ground in Mali. How serious is the security situation?
This situation is, I would say, unprecedented. I can't think of a previous time when the U.S. government has advised all of its citizens to leave the country immediately, which it did last week. That didn't happen with previous coups. That didn't happen when, for example, the militant takeover of the northern half of the country occurred in 2012. So we can say this is an extremely serious situation, and I think a lot of people in Bamako are very concerned about the future.
Yeah, and are foreign nationals being targeted by the armed groups, or is this just out of fear that the situation could continue to devolve?
I don't think foreign nationals have been kidnapped in some cases, but I think the main threat is simply the devolution of the security situation. Without fuel, without electricity, we don't know what will happen in Bamako. Will flights out continue to be available over the next few weeks? There's too much that we really can't predict. So I think the French and American and other governments are advising their citizens to leave out of an abundance of caution.
This country, a vast country that already had a struggling economy. It's one of Africa's poorest nations. Just how bad is the state of things for the Malian economy?
Well, the Malian economy has been in trouble for a long time, but this conflict has been going on since 2012, and people in the capital city really haven't felt its effects until the last few weeks. With this fuel blockade that JNIM is carrying out around the capital and other cities, now, for the first time, urban dwellers in Mali are really feeling the effects of the conflict. It's altering their daily lives to a great degree. Sometimes they have to queue for hours, sometimes all night, just to get fuel for their vehicles. Electricity is limited. So I think this is a way that the rebels can pressure the government. When people in the capital city are actually feeling the pain of this conflict, they might be able to they'll be more interested in their government reaching some kind of negotiated solution with the rebels as opposed to just standing and fighting.
And do you think the ruling junta would do that?
It depends on how desperate the situation gets. But so far, the rebels have been very effective, not in holding territory, but in denying access to the Malian government and the Malian security forces. If they want to cut off a road for a short period of time, they can do that, and it affects the delivery of fuel into the cities. And that's what they've been doing for a few weeks since September. And life in Bamako has not been the same since.
Yeah, and we need to remind our viewers that when this current junta came to power, it was rather popular, wasn't it? It promised to deal with the long-running security crisis in the country. It had criticized UN peacekeeping forces. It had criticized French military in the country. They said they would solve the security problems. How does the public see its military rulers now?
There's definitely some frustration that the regime hasn't been able to deliver on its promises to keep everyone safe and restore full control over the country's territory. But I think even in Bamako, a lot of people continue to support this government because it reflects their values. They want to see a sovereign, independent Mali that doesn't have to answer to the United Nations or to France. And they would rather see their government go on its own way, even if it means relying on Russian or other assistance, as opposed to cooperating with the French military or United Nations peacekeepers.
Yeah, you mentioned Russian there. The junta had hired Russian mercenaries years ago to help tackle this insecurity. What's come of them, and did they make any progress?
Well, the cooperation between the Malian military and Russian paramilitaries has certainly enabled the Malian armed forces to take over some territory that they had lost back in 2012. As of 2023, they finally took back the northern city of Kidal, and that was a highly important symbolic victory. But what we've seen in the last several months is that the Russians are less involved in fighting the JNIM militants on the ground in the southern and western parts of the country. And that seems to be where the rebels have moved and are concentrating most of their activities now. So ultimately, the symbolic victories that the Russian paramilitaries helped gain aren't going to count for much if the supplies to the capital in the south of the country are cut off.
In a number of crises in West Africa, we've seen disinformation, misinformation rampant, particularly with the military coups. I'm curious now that we're having this blockade here. Is that also an issue here?
There have been many reports about fuel convoys coming into the country and coming into Bamako that have not been borne out in fact, but not all of those reports are false. There are still trucks arriving in the capital, not as many as used to be the case. So yes, I'd say there's still an environment of intense disinformation around this conflict. But there are, I think, reliable reports that the government has been able to bring some of its necessary supplies into the country and into the capital.
Yeah, Mali's neighbors certainly taking note of the deteriorating situation there. How do you expect them to react as this continues?
Well, this is going to be a problem for all of them, in part because countries like Guinea and Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal ship items in from their ports and through their territory across the border into Mali. And there's a question of what happens when those trucks can no longer safely enter Mali. But more importantly, I think they're worried about the spillover of this conflict and this violence into their countries and affecting their population. And I think they're quite rightly taking extra security precautions at their borders to try to prevent that from happening.
Bruce, thank you very much. Bruce Whitehouse joining us from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.